Welcome back to the number 8 Plow YouTube channel. My name is Dylan, and in this video we're going to look at plow bottom series, and we're almost going to be exclusively looking at conventional plow bottoms. We're going to look at the different sizes of plow bottoms they made in each series. We're going to be looking at the dates when these bottoms were used, and we're also going to be looking at the abbreviations used to identify these parts and what those abbreviations mean. I go to tractor shows or, a swap meet or something and see people that say, hey, I need a plowshare or a mold board or landside or whatever. And I always ask, well, what kind of bottoms do you have? What series of plow bottom do you have? And 9 times out of 10, people respond with, well, I have Little Genius bottoms. And unfortunately, that really doesn't tell us anything. So hopefully with this video, we'll be able to end some of that confusion. Couple things to remember throughout this entire video. The first one being, we'll discuss dates that they use these bottoms, but that does not necessarily mean they didn't make parts after the end of production. They would have still had product support for those bottoms. And so the stuff would have still been available through International or through an aftermarket vendor as well. So keep that in mind. Probably the biggest thing that I want to touch on before we get into bottoms, I don't have tons of new plow bottoms laying around. I don't have really, I think I have one complete plow bottom assembly. So I'm building bottom assemblies out of new parts. All the parts I'm using to build these assemblies, outside of maybe a couple of shims, will be all brand new old stock parts. And for this video, I'm using all OE International Harvester stuff. I'm not using any aftermarket stuff, nothing that I've had made recently, nothing like that. This stuff is all new old stock parts. None of this stuff has been modified in any way. When you'll see some of this stuff and it may look odd to you, and you may think, oh, somebody's cut that, or maybe, that's been used, it looks used or something like that. This is all new parts. And some of the different shapes and sizes of stuff that you're going to see is just the oddity of some of these plow bottoms. So just keep that in mind. The first bottom we're going to look at is the HSKA bottom. And the HSKA bottom was introduced in 1939, and they made it all the way until 1969. And was one of the last conventional plow bottoms offered by International Harvester. They were made in left hand and right hand, and they're very popular in the Midwest, pretty common to find. You'll see them at plow days or plow competition, but they're very popular, and so we'll cover this one first. This is a HSKA bottom. This one here specifically is 14 inch. The HS and HSKA stands for high speed. The K stands for general purpose, and the A stands for steel frog. They made the HSKA bottom in 12, 14, and 16 inch. None of them are drilled for extensions except for 12 inch. That was an option, and you would have a OA before the part number to identify that it was drilled for extensions. Most of these will just say O before the part number. This one here, the mold board, is a 03132, very popular bottom. The way this bottom I have equipped here, this would be a front bottom. It has a short land side, and this one also has a cobblestone plowshare. You can see here how it's kind of clipped here. Later on, they would call that maybe like a short share. You may be familiar with that on some throwaway stuff. And this share here is a full cut or regular plowshare. The plowshares used on the HSKA are of the quick draw type that use a quick draw bolt like this that meets into this thimble here to draw it up close to the board. So the difference between these two shares, really, outside of the material they're made out of, is the way this is clipped right here. And so if you had shares like this on your plow, or you had a share like this on your plow and you're looking for a replacement, you may see this and think, man, that's not the same as what I have. And it's not, but it may fit. And this is a direct replacement for this one. You could put that on there and you just have extra material here. It may not be common to have a cobblestone share where you live at, or on plows that you've seen. You may have never seen either of these styles of shares, but it's just an option that was available. They did make shares out of different material. This one here is a soft center. This is a steel cast. It's a chilled material, and they also made solids. Next thing we want to look at is the bolt pattern on this frog. This is a 3-bolt pattern. This was originally used by P&O, and International Harvester continued it. You can take a HSKA bottom or any of these other bottoms that we're going to look at today and unbolt from your plow and bolt up any of these other bottoms. They did use this this style of pattern for a very, very, very long time. So it is popular to see people swap out bottoms on plows because they can't get parts, and Super Chief stuff is still available. So people swap out Super Chief bottoms all the time on other models of plows. Super Chief stuff was not available for Little Wonders or number 8 Little Genius plows, but it is very common to see those bottoms on those plows. And here's some part numbers of the HSKA mold boards. They were made in left and right hand, and they did use number 3 and number 7 bolts. And now we'll take a look at the KA bottom. The KA bottom was produced from 1929 to 1962. It was made in left hand and right hand. It was pretty popular in the Midwest. Later on, the HSKA was probably a little bit more popular than the KA because it's a higher speed bottom. But it's pretty common to find in the Midwest. The plow that I use and take to plow days has KA bottoms on it. But they're pretty common, and you'll see them pretty regularly. This is a KA bottom. The K stands for general purpose, and the A stands for steel frog. They made them in 4 sizes, 12, 14, 16, and 18 inch. Much like the HSKA bottom, this uses a quick draw type share using a draw bolt to draw the share up tight to the mold board. You might be looking at this bottom and think, man, you know, did I really change anything other than the board? I didn't. All I did to convert this whole bottom assembly from a HSKA to a KA is change the mold board. And actually everything else here is just the same. I just unbolted the board and bolted a different one on it. This again is a 14 inch. The part number on this mold board is 03046. This one is drilled for extensions, and it's pretty common to find KA bottoms drilled for extensions. 9 times out of 10, all the KA boards you'll see are drilled for extensions. So now that we've seen that a lot of stuff really doesn't change except maybe a mold board, and you would have a completely different style of bottom, it's very important that you know the part number of your mold board. While some of these shares are interchangeable between a HSKA or KA or maybe a different bottom that we'll look at going forward, it's very important that you know what mold board you have, as 9 times out of 10, it's going to be the determining factor in what style of bottom that you have. So like the HSKA we just looked at, the KA has a variety of shares that will fit, and they were made in a variety of materials. So like the HSKA, the KA uses a lot of similar parts. Some of the land sides in certain applications are interchangeable, as well as shares. So the main thing that you want to remember when you're looking for parts or you're trying to figure out what series of bottom that you have, you need to know the part number on your mold board, as that could be the determining factor. Like in this instance here, all I did was change a mold board, and I have a completely different bottom series. It wouldn't matter too much in 14 inch because my share is the same, and my land side and frog and everything is the same. But in 12-inch and HSKA, they use the same frog and land side as 14 and 16-inch. In KA, the 12-inch does not, and it's a completely different part number, as well as the 18-inch. So it's very important when looking for parts that you know what series of bottom you have, and it's very important to know what mold board you have. So like the HSKA, the KA used number 7 and number 3 bolts. They used number 7s earlier on, then transitioned to number 3s later, but it is not uncommon to find number 7 bolts in a KA bottom. Here's a side shot of the KA bottom. Everything except for this mold board is identical to the HSKA we just looked at. It still has the same land side and frog and everything else, and still has all the hardware down below that the HSKA did. So on this KA bottom, you can see here it is drilled for extensions. I obviously do not have one in it. You don't have to run a mold board extension if you don't want to, but you know, you can just leave the bolts in it. But it is drilled for extensions, and if you wanted them, you could install them. And here's some part numbers of the KA mold boards. They did make them in left and right hand, and they use number 3 and number 7 bolts. And that wraps up the KA bottom. And with wrapping up the KA bottom, it is important to mention that the HSKA and the KA are both general purpose bottoms of the XX series. The next bottom we're going to look at is the HA bottom. And the HA bottom was produced from 1929 to 1962, and it is part of the Scotch Clipper general purpose bottom series. They're kind of common. They're not as common, you know, where I live at as the KA or HSKA, but you do see them. I have a 10-inch Little Genius that has HA bottoms, but they are halfway common, especially compared to some stuff we're going to look at afterwards. So to wrap up the general purpose bottom series, we have the HA, and the H stands for general purpose, and the A stands for steel frog. They made them in 4 sizes, from 10 to 16 inch. This example I have in front of me here is in 16 inch. This mold board is not drilled for extensions, but it was an option to have the HA drilled for extensions. The way I have this bottom equipped would be correct for a 1-bottom plow in certain applications, or would be correct for a 2-bottom or larger plow as the rear bottom. The HA, like the HSKA and KA, use a quick draw type bolt to draw the share up close to the board. And you will notice that the way I have this one equipped here has a lot different looking share than the previous shares we've looked at. And this is a rice share, and really doesn't have a well-defined point like the other shares we have looked at. But that is a new share and it has not been used, but it was just a option available for some of these conventional plow bottoms. So unlike the last 2 bottoms we looked at, this land side here would be correct for a rear bottom on a 2-bottom or larger plow, or would be correct for a 1-bottom plow in certain applications. You can see it does have a heel, and it's quite a bit longer than the previous land sides that we've looked at. And here's some part numbers of the HA bottoms. They did make them in left and right hand, and they did use number 3 and number 7 bolts. So to wrap up the general purpose bottom series, we're going to go through common parts that would be available for all 3 of these bottoms. We're going to start looking at plowshares, and all of these plowshares mount the same way. They're all quick draw, and they all have a notch in the gunnel that meets up with a corresponding dowel in the frog. They also have a tab here that meets up with a notch in the bottom of the frog and helps hold it on. It's common to see this little dowel here on soft-centered and solid plowshares. And on a cast plowshare, it's common to have a small shelf made into the gunnel to meet up into that notch in the frog. While there are 3 different sizes of plowshares on this table, with what I have here represents 3 different styles of material used to make plowshares, and also covers 4 styles of plowshare. This one here is a cobblestone share, which we looked at earlier, that has the corner clipped out of it here. This is a regular plowshare or full cut. This share here with really doesn't have a well-defined point is a rice share. This one's made out of solid material. And this share here is a alfalfa share. And I don't know if you can pick it up on camera or not. Hopefully we do. But as we get closer to this end of the share, it actually gets wider. This one here is made out of solid material. Something else that these general purpose bottoms have in common are the styles of landsides they use. This has a slight curvature here, and it is beveled here where it meets the moldboard. And all of these general purpose bottoms, at least in the OE, use this style of landside. Sometimes it's common to see in the aftermarket world where they just cut this material down farther and don't have this curve or this bevel. But in the OE, they always do. They did use some different styles of bolts in these. They use number 3s or number 7s. This one here takes a big through bolt. It's a 5/8 number 7. And then later on, they would have had a square cut out just to fit the bolt head into, and wouldn't have had that big through bolt. These are just some options that were available for these general purpose bottoms. Now we'll take a look at the SL bottom. The SL bottom was produced from 1940 to 1960. It was made for sticky soils or heavier type soils. They did use number 3 and number 7 bolts, like all the plow bottoms we have looked at so far. The SL bottom is not really common where I live at. I do know of a couple of plows around that do have SL bottoms. I know at one time this style of bottom would have been popular, and I don't know if they didn't have parts support, for them as long as they did for some other bottom series or what really happened. But I actually don't have a plow that has SL bottoms. I just happen to have a SL bottom assembly. So we'll take a look at it. This is an SL bottom. The SL stands for high speed slat. They made them in 3 sizes, 12, 14, and 16 inch. This example I have in front of me is a 12 inch, and the way it is equipped, it would be a front bottom, has a short land side. This actually has some common parts with its HSKA counterpart and the same size, like the plowshare and the land side, but there's some obvious differences here, especially with its lack of moldboard and the addition of these slats. This does still use a steel frog, but it is not notated in the abbreviation. And this frog is completely different than any frog that we have looked at so far. And while this share is still quick draw, and this landside is kind of common, everything else is kind of unique to this bottom. The whole idea with having slats instead of a moldboard is that you have a whole lot less friction area, and it would be a little bit easier to pull. So here's a side shot of it. You can see the front land side here, the short one. And you can still see that this share has a notch in the gunnel that meets up to a corresponding dowel in the frog. These still would have had long rear land sides with a heel, but just another style of bottom. And even though this one's a lot different, the whole idea, at least in this area, is still the same. The SL was also made in left and right hand. And since we're wrapping up the SL, it's important to mention the SSL bottom. The SSL stands for high speed short slat. It was made in both left and right hand, and it was only made in 14 and 16 inch. The only difference between the SSL and the SL is that the number 4 and number 5 slats are shorter, and they were specifically produced for the number 39 two-way plow or number 39 tumble plow. That's the only time that you will see those bottoms used. And next we'll look at the BBA bottom. The BBA bottom was produced in both left and right hand, and it was made from 1933 to 1961 in 16 inch, and was made from 1937 to 1961 in 12 and 14 inch. They do use a large variety of fasteners. They use number 3s, number 6s, number 7s, and this is one of 2 of the only applications we're going to see these number 11 or patent head plow bolts used. These bottoms were common down south or in the Northeast. And if you live in those areas and you think of an old-timey conventional plow bottom, this is probably what you'll think of. They were made for rockier or a gravelly type of soil. Where I live at in the Midwest, this bottom is not common at all. I do have 2 plows that have these bottoms, and both of them most definitely did not come from Indiana, and I had to drive quite a ways to get both of them. But here we go, taking a look at the BBA. This is a BBA bottom, the BB standing for a chilled bottom with a somewhat bluff general purpose steel moldboard adapted to stubble and tame hay sod plowing. The A stands for steel frog. They did make these in 3 sizes, 12, 14, and 16 inch. This example I have here is in 12 inch, and you'll notice that it is a whole lot different than the previous bottoms we have looked at. This one uses a shin, whereas the other bottoms that we have looked at have not. And you'll also notice that this share is a whole lot differently shaped than the other shares we have looked at. This is a stony share, and you can see it kind of tapers down towards the end. It still does have a well-defined point, but it's shaped a whole lot differently than the other bottoms that we have looked at. This still does use a quick draw type of share, but it uses a different style of draw bolt. It uses this J-shaped bolt in 12 and 14 inch. In 16 inch, there's a lot of differences. The frog is going to be different, the shin will be different, and it still uses this kind of common style of draw bolt to pull that share up to the board. The way I currently have this bottom configured, it would be correct for a front bottom on a 2-bottom or larger plow. It has a short land side. The land side, the shin, and the share on this are all made out of cast material. This would be a style of rear land side that you would find, or possibly on a 1-bottom plow in certain applications. This bottom does use a lead filler plate that goes between the frog and the moldboard. And you can see here that on this frog there are 2 holes that match up to some corresponding dowels in the share that kind of pull up with this draw bolt to hold them in. In the end of the share, there is no notch like in the previous bottoms we have looked at. It's simply held on by these 2 thimble-shaped pieces and this draw bolt. And here's a side shot of the BBA bottom. You'll notice that the share does not have a notch in it, like I mentioned, and that this shin actually goes down and is part of the land side area before we get to the land side. Like I said, this is a short land side, and this one does use a large through bolt that would go through the land side, the frog, and the frame beam. That was a whole lot easier looking in time-lapse than it was in real life. This bottom is now very heavy, a lot heavier than the one we just looked at. But I did convert this from a 12-inch BBA into a 14-inch BA. The B in BA stands for a chilled bottom with a somewhat bluff general-purpose chilled moldboard adapted to stubble and tame hay sod plowing. The BA is pretty much going to be identical to the BBA except for the moldboard. That is really the only thing that changed. Now I did change the size, so I did change the share, but that is really the only difference. They still made them in the same sizes. They still made them, left and right. They still use the same style of bolts, and they still made them through the same years of production. The one difference with running a cast board instead of a steel one, I have no filler plate in here, and this still uses a steel frog. All I did was change the mold board, and since I went up from 12 to 14, I did change the share. This mold board is ribbed on the back, which I'll show you here. And that's a telltale sign that it's a cast bottom. These were used in the same types of soils and everything like that the BBA was. It's still using the same J-shaped draw bolt in 12 and 14 inch. And in 16 inch, it's still using this conventional looking draw bolt. They still used long rear land sides on these like we looked at earlier, and I didn't change any of that. The way this share mounts and everything about it is still the same as the BBA. Really the only difference is the cast board. And in both BBA and BA, they are never drilled for extensions. They are drilled for extra braces, but they are not drilled for extensions. And you will never see them from the factory with extensions, and if there is one, it's added afterwards. So you can see here the back of the mold board is ribbed, and all of the mold boards, even in the aftermarket world, for these style of bottoms will be ribbed. This is just another style of bottom that you may see. Like I said, where I live at, this would not be common at all, and people locally have came over before and saw some of these cast mold boards and thought, what in the world is that? That's everything that we need to see about the BA and the BBA. It is important to remind you guys that the parts I am using are new, and that stony share to somebody like myself who lives in the Midwest may look like it's used the way it's shaped, but it's not. It's just one of the oddities of some of these bottoms and some of the differences in these bottoms. And they were kind of a regional thing. You know, you wouldn't have something like that, especially where I live. So it would look very uncommon. I don't even know if it would go in the ground where I live at, but it's just an option. These shares that we looked at, they made them in, regular, they made them in cobblestone or stony, and they made them out of a variety of materials like solids, and they also made them out of chilled material like steel cast. The next bottoms that we're going to look at are almost the same. They're very similar. They are a little bit newer, but the whole idea is the same. And we're going to be looking at the HSB and HSBB bottoms. The HSB and HSBB were made in 12, 14, and 16 inch. They were made in left and right hand, and they were produced for a short amount of time compared to everything else that we've looked at. They made them from 1948 to 1954, and they will look kind of similar, but there are some differences to be able to kind of determine which one you are looking at from a distance, which we will go over. This is an HSB bottom, the HS standing for high speed, and similar to that of the BA, the B standing for a chilled bottom with a somewhat bluff general purpose chilled mold board designed for stubble and tame hay sod plowing. This is very, very similar to the BA, except that it's a high speed bottom. This does have a cast mold board. It does still have a steel frog, even though it's not notated in the abbreviation used to identify the bottom. And it does use a cast shin. This shin is a little bit wider than the BA that we looked at in the BBA. And the way I have this one equipped, it would be correct for a one bottom plow, most likely a mounted plow. It has a very long land side on it. This does still use a quick draw type share. This one is very similar to that of the HSKA, KA, and HA, and it uses a very similar draw bolt. You can see this still kind of tapers down like the BA and BBA shares do. And this cast mold board is ribbed much like those mold boards. Now this frog assembly does not use a lower brace. It is a welded assembly and has a brace welded into it. So what would we need to do to convert this HSB to an HSBB? If you were guessing change a mold board, you're 99% correct. This is a 12-inch mold board for an HSBB, which the only difference between that and this bottom here in front of me is that it would have a steel board and it's not near as thick. Unlike the BBA, the HSBB does not use a lead filler plate and actually uses steel shims to go in between the mold board and the frog. Here's a side shot of the HSB. The HSBB would be identical except for the mold board. You can look here where this shin is. It does not go down in between the share and land side like the BA and BBA do. This meets up next to the land side, but there is a transition straight from share to land side and not to shin. You'll notice also that this share has this notch cut in it that meets up to a corresponding dowel in the frog, like the HSKA and KA and HA have. And the BA and BBA in 16-inch did have this notch, but the 12 and 14-inch did not. This one does in all sizes, and it still has that shelf on the inside of the share that meets up to that notch in the frog. You can see that this one has an extremely long land side, and this would be the correct land side for a one-bottom mounted type plow. So here's a backside shot of the HSB. It's still ribbed like the other cast bottom we looked at. It is not drilled for extensions like the BA. This is for another brace. This frog is a welded assembly, and you'll see that there's no lower brace, but it has this piece welded in it, and that takes the place of a lower brace, and it is also where our quick draw bolt goes through. And that wraps up the HSB and HSBB bottoms. While we started out looking at what I would consider a regular looking plow bottom, and we've kind of progressed into some really odd and strange things, we're going to end with something still halfway common, and that's the GA bottom. The GA bottom was produced from 1929 to 1962. It was popular in sticky soils that did not scour well, and was used in places where the trash could easily be buried. It was very popular in the Northwest and the soils they have. And our friend John Gaard, this bottom is very common where he lives. Here in Indiana, I do see some of these bottoms. For some reason, when I find them, they're always an 18-inch. I'm not really sure why that is. And I've seen these bottoms used all the way down into southern Ohio. But I would consider them a common bottom. Where you live at, it may not be. But let's hop in and check out the GA bottom. This is a GA bottom, the G standing for Stubble Series and the A standing for Steel Frog. They did make the GA in 4 sizes from 12 to 18 inch. This example here is an 18 inch. You'll notice that it doesn't use a shin like the last few bottoms we looked at. It's a steel mold board, kind of similar to the first few bottoms we looked at, same idea at least. And they had a couple of different share options for the GA bottoms. This example here is a regular plow share, and they did also offer an alfalfa share in the GA. You'll see here how this is kind of has a couple of angles at the end of this share. That's not necessarily a GA bottom type share or anything like that. A lot of times your 18-inch conventional plowshares will look like this at the end. The way I have this bottom equipped, it would be correct for the rear bottom on a 2-bottom or larger plow, or it would be correct for a 1-bottom plow in certain applications. The GA commonly used number 3 and number 7 plow bolts. This mold board here uses number 7s. But this is still a quick draw share, and it still uses a very similar style of draw bolt like the first few bottoms we looked at. You may notice that this board, even though it's pretty big, it is 18-inch, it's a lot stubbier than, other bottoms you may see in 18-inch. I have some other 18-inch boards back here, and they are a lot bigger than this guy is. And here's a side shot of the GA, and you may notice that this land side is very similar to some earlier land sides we looked at. It is curved, and it is also beveled and meets up next to the mold board. You'll see here that the share still has a notch in it, and it meets up to a corresponding dowel that's made into the frog. And there's still a dowel in this share that meets up underneath the frog to help mount it. And here's a list of the mold boards used on the GA bottoms. You can see they were made in both left and right hand. So why is it important that we know the plow bottom series we have? The first reason that I could think of would be to look for replacement parts. If you broke something or wore something out, you wouldn't want to go to an auction or a tractor show or something and see some parts and think, yeah, I think that will work, just to get home and find out it doesn't. And then you're left with a paperweight that you can't do anything with. Another reason, we can use this information to figure out when these plow bottoms were made and help us narrow down when our plow was manufactured. So we're going to use that in the future to figure out when our number 8s were made. So it's very important that we have this information. Now, in this video, I did not cover all of the plow bottoms made by International Harvester, nor did I cover all of the plow bottoms used on number 8 Little Genius plows. Now, all the bottoms I did cover in this video, with the exception of the SSL, were used on number 8s. There's still a lot of bottoms that we didn't cover, and helping us cover these bottoms is John Gaard from the Everything Moldboard Plow YouTube channel. There will be a link in the description to his channel. Make sure you go over there, subscribe, turn on notifications, because he's going to have a video similar to this one where he covers plow bottoms. But he's covering plow bottoms we didn't even discuss. So it's very important that we have the information he has to share also. And I'm super excited to see his video when it comes out. So make sure you turn on your notifications so you can see when he does upload that video. That's going to be it for this video, guys. Appreciate you sticking around watching. Hopefully you learned something, maybe saw something odd. But don't forget, what is the part number on your mold board?